My FX6 finally came in about a month ago, and I've been using this camera just about every day. I wrote down a lot of pros and cons in my phone. The pros are very well documented on YouTube at this point, but I kind of wanted to focus on the cons in this video. I'll go over about a minute or two of the pros, but like I said, the cons sometimes don't get as much light shed on them. So my first pro of the FX6 is definitely the form factor, and the size and the weight. The size of this is very easy to just strip down, pack it into a backpack, and you don't really know it's there. It just feels like it could be a larger mirrorless body, kind of piggybacking off of the last one, but the next pro is the ergonomics of the FX6. All of these things just feel like they're easy to use when it comes to just shooting video for a long period of time. From the top handle to the side handle, being able to, if you're filming down on a subject, rotate the side handle and film down, or just in one click of this side handle, rotate it back up, and now you can get an up angle. Makes it very easy. I have a couple of other opinions about this side handle I'll get to in a little bit later, but I do like the overall ergonomics of the FX6. I also like that there are full-size XLR ports on the handle of the FX6. Another thing I'll get into in a second. If I'm going to be using XLRs in a studio, I used to have to just use my Tascam X8 that I'm using right now, boomed over the subject. But being able to run audio directly into the camera is something nice if you just want to have fast turnaround times, but you still want to use professional audio. I also like the amount of information that the menus have. I have a couple of things to say about the menus in the cons section, but the amount of information you get versus the menu system in the alpha cameras is a welcome addition. And the most obvious pro that I just saved for last was the ND filters. The NDs built into this camera and the auto ND, the first time I used it wide open with my 50mm 1.2 was unbelievable. Going from a dark environment to a light environment, it actually tracked eyes and kept a consistent exposure on the subject. The ND filters and the auto ND really does live up to the hype on this camera. Moving on to the cons of the FX6, the first con I have is with this side handle here. There's just a little bit of play in it, and I love using this side handle to just, use this camera with one hand, especially since I have, my menus and my record button here. But what I really do not like is that 1/8 inch or a 1/16 inch of play that just no matter how you move the camera when you first pick it up, there's just a little bit of give there. So I feel like this could, be alleviated with some kind of a shim or something, but I would really be interested in buying a new handle or some kind of an aftermarket handle that's just a better fit with a closer tolerance there. I feel like the side handle shouldn't be moving back and forth, especially that much. My next con for the FX6 is why doesn't this camera come with an XLR microphone? I had to buy the XLR mic separate. This is the microphone that comes with the K3M module, and I just have some dead cat windscreen on it. Typically for my shoots, I use boomed out audio if I'm farther away, but if I am up close with my subject and I'm, within maybe 4 or 5 feet of them, it is very easy to just get very usable, quick audio with the onboard XLR microphone. My next con was the recording modes are somewhat limiting in XAVC-L, but you should be using XAVC-I anyways. If I'm going to be doing a long shoot and I know I won't be color grading anything, I'll totally use the XAVC-L. I was really surprised at how few recording options were in the FX6. It's either the XAVC-L or XAVC-I. While I guess you don't really need that many recording options, I was surprised at how few there actually were. Every time I move my camera around, the dead cat sheds something new off of it. So I'm sorry if you see a bunch of dead cat hair fibers floating around in this video. The next con I had for the FX6 was the DCI and UHD options are kind of confusing. The DCI is higher resolution, but it crops in on the image slightly. The UHD is technically lower resolution, but it is oversampled using almost the whole sensor, but just downscaling it a little bit. So I really don't know why they would do that way. If you are a little bit more technical with the differences between DCI and UHD, maybe you can leave me a comment down below and tell me a little bit more about the technical details behind that. But I thought that was kind of confusing when I was reading over the documentation. My next con for the FX6 is that the 4K 120 is only available in S&Q mode, and it is only UHD and there is no audio. I like to include sound design below my slow motion clips to help you feel like you're there, and I didn't realize how much I relied on the audio with the 4K 120. Even if I wasn't going to be using that audio in the final edit, the audio was kind of scratch audio that helped me inform my audio design, what I should actually be using. My next con for the FX6 is the pretty obvious one, and it's a lack of 3.5mm input jacks. All of my wireless microphones are using 3.5mm into the camera to feed the audio to the camera. So now I'm using either my DJI mics or my Rode mics in internally recording and then syncing in post, just like I would do if I was recording external XLR audio. It feels like it's only a matter of time before I'm going to end up buying those Sony mics that the transmitter plugs into the top cold shoe or hot shoe mount here. I was putting off buying those mics because I have, no less than like 6 other wireless microphones. And I finally found the DJI mics that are a great run and gun solution. They have a great little charging case. But now I can't use them because I can't feed the audio directly into my camera. I can get an XLR to 3.5mm jack, but that comes with its own set of problems. So really there's not a really elegant solution for using 3.5mm on the FX6. My next con for the FX6 is how expensive the batteries are. I had no idea how expensive these batteries were when I first bought the camera. I figured they could be a little bit more expensive, but not as expensive as they are. If you're trying to price out a larger, genuine Sony battery, it's almost cheaper to buy a V-mount battery and the V-mount battery adapter. And I already had V-mount batteries for my other setups, so that was my workaround of how to get V-mount or more power to the FX6. This was another one that I wrote down when I was first hunting through the menus of the FX6, and it's strange errors that don't give any logs or meaningful messages. One thing, I was using a slow card and I plugged it in, and I was in XAVC-I, and I was trying to do something that the camera wouldn't allow it to write to that card, and it gave me this message. I forget what the message was off the top of my head, but I was like, what does that even mean? It doesn't, just tell me the card is too slow. Don't get around it in this Machiavellian way and tell me like the operation can't be completed. Just the card speed is too slow or something. Like, just break it down for me. I actually had to Google what it meant, and then I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But I remember like being super excited, plugging in my memory card and then getting an error, and I was like, what does this error even mean? Again, I remember I was a little annoyed when I wrote this one too. I feel like I'm fighting with the menu system. The menu system just takes a little bit of trial and error and figuring things out and customizing them to how you like them. And one thing that I wrote down that was frustrating about the menu system in particular was if you open up thumbnail view over a menu, it layers them over top of each other. So then if you press record quickly, it won't back out of all those menus. You have to press thumbnail and then menu again, and then you'll be back to the recording options. I didn't realize how bad of a habit I had with my alpha cameras. I'd be in the menu and I would never hit menu back. I would just half press the shutter button and then it would go back to the regular camera view. You can't do that with the FX6. Once I had a monitor on my camera, that was less of an issue because I always had a dedicated feed. Another thing that like kind of annoyed me a little bit was the next con was once this camera is rigged up, the SD card slot competes with the V-mount battery. I just had to swap out my batteries real quick, but this is one of the reasons that I went with the wooden camera V-mount battery plate, because if you loosen this knob over here, you can actually slide this V-mount battery plate up and over in multiple different orientations, and then if you clamp this down again, it'll actually stay there. So this makes it easy to get to the battery or get to your storage in the back here. Even if you don't do that, you can totally get to the storage, but it's just a little bit trickier once you're getting a full-size card out of here. It gets a little tricky and you have to do like a little angle to get it out. I remember that was the end of the first like a real shoot I did, and it was like kind of a day. And I was like, all right, it's just time to dump this footage and start editing. And I was like trying to fight with the SD card to get it out of the slot. And I left the SD card in and I picked up my phone and I was like, I'm writing this con down. Like, and it felt good to get that out. So that's super, not even a big deal. But I just remember how funny I was, like frustrated at how hard it was to get the SD card out. I haven't tested the Tilta or the SmallRig or any of the other companies' V-mount battery adapters, but this one looked like it didn't need rails, and also I could get to the SD card slot because it was so far away. I think it was like the end of the day and I was just ready to be done with everything. So that probably played a little bit of a role in me writing this con down, but I just thought it was something funny to include. And another con I wrote down when I was frustrated was, if you have a base plate on the camera, the bottom layer of controls is difficult to use. So what I mean by that is, if you're monitoring audio with the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack here, it's actually really difficult to get to the power on and off button if you have, I have Beyerdynamic, they're like DT770s, and the end of the cable has like a reinforced end. So they're very durable, but the cable sticks out to like right here. So I have to actually unplug my headphones, turn the camera off, and then drape the cable over the back. And then when it's time to turn the camera on again, I have to take my cable, turn the camera on, and then plug the camera in. So it's kind of like a setup process. If you guys have any solutions, maybe the solution is just get smaller headphones with the smaller jack in the front. But if you've run into that, let me know. That wasn't really a huge con, but it was something that I ran into and I was like a little bit annoyed again. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna write this down. My last one is not really a pro, not really a con, but more of an observation. And that is, your custom buttons really matter. The menus are very dense and quickly swapping between settings can be tough if there isn't a dedicated button for it. I need to refine my buttons because settings take too long for me to adjust right now. I wrote that after trying to customize some of my buttons. I got some help from people on Instagram that gave me great button layouts. Some of them worked for me, some of them didn't. If you have any custom buttons, please let me know in the comments down below, and I would really like to know what everyone's custom buttons are, because I feel a little bit frustrated still. Coming from Sony Alpha cameras, I can adjust settings on those in my sleep. But on this one, even though there's more buttons, if there's like one specific setting that I need to get to and I need to hunt through the menu to get there, it takes me longer than it would to adjust on one of my other Sony cameras. So that's like a little frustrating to me, and I'm sure that'll come with time, getting more muscle memory and setting up my menu favorites. But yeah, I would be interested in any custom buttons that you guys have set up on your cameras. Like I said earlier, I wanted to lean into the cons a little bit more with this video because I feel like there's a lot of videos just kind of singing the praises of the FX6 for good reason, but there's not a lot of like cons videos out there. So anything that was slightly wrong, I made sure to include in this video so far. And I've only had this camera for a month. I've tried to film as much as I can with it, but I'm sure more things will come up in the future. I have tons more FX6 videos in the content pipeline that I'm working on right now. I just wanted to make sure I really understood the camera more before I started making videos about it. Getting this first FX6 video out feels very good because I've been wanting to make so many videos about this camera and with this camera that I'll have a lot more in the future. So if you guys are interested in FX6 content, be sure to subscribe and check back in the future. I'll have plenty of stuff, and I just want to say thank you guys for sticking around to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.